Dave Chappelle, to his great credit, deserves, I think, a lot of aplomb for just going to some middle of nowhere town in Ohio and then going to the town council meetings to keep like corporations from moving in and like arguing on behalf of little pubs and little breweries and like little restaurants that are there. Dave Chappelle, if you haven't looked into this, like has a little, to your point, like he's a, I don't know how much money he has, definitely a multi-millionaire. Dave Chappelle goes into this little town in the middle of truly nowhere in Ohio, and he just like saves the city, like saves the like nice genteel like nature of the city. And he actually went and argued against a huge development that was going to come into the town because it's been popularized probably because of Dave Chappelle, and he killed it. He killed it, and then he bought the land so that no one could develop it.
Yep.
Which is very neat, which is actually similar to what you just described.
But it's good. We're doing a big play with Times Square on New Year's. We're getting the whole North Tower. We're getting a percentage of it. So every 90 seconds, we're going to have 10 to 15 seconds of the whole North Tower, except for there's 2 ads owned by like Coke and M&M or something. But I was like, we should do things that assert ourselves in these cultural spaces and make people aware that like we're winning, we're growing, we're taking over. So that was like something big we did this year. We're planning, we're trying to come up with an idea for a bunch of culture jamming marketing stuff next year. And I think about that and I'm just like, when I go to these small towns and I met this local guy and he was like, you should consider buying here to help bring things back and kind of kick things up a notch. There are a bunch of buildings with the pride flags all over the place. And we both agreed when we were talking about it that people are just doing that because they're scared. They're scared of the violent terrorists. Yeah. And so long as there is no counter, it's just going to keep spreading. People are going to put up flags, not because they believe in it, but because they're like, this stops people from attacking my business. If I had $1 billion, I'd go in there and be like, okay, I'll buy these 3, that building, and that building. And then we'll get some locals in the community who oppose this stuff to create the space they want to create. Invest in that. Invest in the future of this country. Yeah. I think the problem is, and it was this guy, Nate. Shout out, Nate. It's nice meeting you. He said, we had a protest out here and BLM and these other groups are showing up. And he said, most of the town, it's West Virginia. They oppose this stuff and none of them could take any time out of their day to come out and say no to these people. And then I was like, that's it right there, isn't it? They won't even show up to say no. That's a bummer.
So the Passover is when the spirit of death, right, passes over the households of Egypt, and it doesn't kill the firstborn son as long as you put lamb's blood right on your door. This is what Passover is, a high holiday, high Jewish holiday, still celebrated Christian or Jewish traditions. And so in Washington, D.C., I literally watched people do a metaphorical, like hedonistic Passover on their homes. So I lived on Capitol Hill in a very bad neighborhood where like a couple blocks from where Jack Posobiec had Antifa come after Jack. That famous photo of Jack like staring down Antifa, where they were looking to tear down our Lincoln statue. There's a statue of Abraham Lincoln. They wanted to tear it down. There were mobs putting nooses around it to rip it down. People put up gay rights flags and BLM flags in their yards, literally as like a please don't come here thing. I know these people were not, some of them were Republicans, and they were not on board with this. They needed to wave these flags and put this stuff up in order to like stop the mobs from coming to their street. You remember Rand Paul almost got beat like to death with his wife Kelly Paul outside of the White House after Donald Trump's speech at the 2020 RNC convention. I was like 7 feet from that watching that happen. I mean, it's like, it really is terroristic, almost. It's domestic terrorism. And then you go back to D.C. This is my first time back in a year because I moved away a year ago. I followed this great podcaster I listen to every single day. His advice is he goes, get out of the cities. Get out of the cities.
Oh, Jack Posobiec?
Yeah. He's great.
Must have been Jack Posobiec.
Great beard. Fantastic hat. And I followed that advice. We went, sort of down to, I guess Tampa is a larger city, but it's not like D.C. It's very, very different from D.C. in so many ways. I was just back in D.C. for the first time in a year. Man, the decay. There's no better word for it. There's entropy that is happening to that city. I lived there for 15 years. I worked on Capitol Hill. I've asked questions in White House briefings. I've been all over that city, and I've never seen anything like it. First off, there's tent cities. As soon as you get into the nation's capital, which you shouldn't have in a nation's capital, right? So if you're visiting from another country, you shouldn't see like squalor in tent cities. And then there's no one there. And the people who are there, it's like a zombie town. The people who are there are masked, like triple masked, like walking around. Here's a photo from a store. I had to run into a store and grab an item. Here's a photo that says at a Nordstrom. This is at a Nordstrom rack. This said
the gas pipeline, right?
Nordstrom too.
Hispanic and Latinx welcome here. For your heritage,
were they normally
along with everyone else?
Latinx, right? That's exactly.
Were they banned before? What are you doing? What is that? Nordstrom?
This is Nordstrom Rack.
Nordstrom, why'd you ban the Latino people from your store?
What's the next?
That's not
I had to
okay.
take a photo. It's like these people don't understand
They had to issue a notice to let people know they weren't doing it anymore.
Yeah, like that's what I got from that. You know?
the decay and the entropy is really happening in real time. It was shocking for me to go back.
Oh yeah. So, we're looking at setting up a brick and mortar location. Probably going to be. We've been talking about doing like a community center kind of thing, and I've got these people. For one, the real estate markets, the whole market itself, everything's just insane, and they're trying to get insane.
Good way or bad way?
It just insane. Like they're trying to sell property for substantially more than you could even make money off of. It's just that they want to sell a building and it's $500,000, and you're in an area with no foot traffic, no customers. How is this money worth anywhere near that? Even if you opened a chicken restaurant, you would be able to sell enough to cover the cost of the mortgage in this area. Is insane, and they're like, it's worth it. And I think a lot of it has to do with these big investment firms. They keep buying up property, which keeps the prices artificially high. Yeah. Nobody wants to sell because they're convinced it'll be worth it. Then the cities start decaying. So I go to these places. We had one story where I'm trying to buy this building, and they're telling me how great the city is, how good it's going to be. And I'm like, the local diner is closed on a Saturday at noon because nobody wants to have it. Nobody's working. So if I can't even go to a store and every business is closed, no one is here, what makes you think there's value in this location? They're like, it's worth it. And to me, it's that kind of mentality that's stopping people from investing in their towns, from actually building community. And then everyone just sits at home on the internet and does nothing. Or they were raptured. I don't know. That's the other joke. Where is everybody? Like you mentioned, like in DC, like where is everybody?
In Florida, in DC,
maybe, yeah.
In DC, it's estimated that 70,000 people moved out of DC in 2021,
really?
And it's estimated in 2021 that 220,000 people moved to Florida. So these are just like rough estimates, but again, a lot of people are moving where the freedom usually is more available, where there's less taxes, less government, less regulations, and a lot of times that's Florida.
Did you guys see that video of those two dudes? The gas tanker comes in, and the guy's like, "You can talk all that ish about DeSantis, but he brought the gas to Arcadia. I know who I'm voting for.
I'm a Democrat.
Yep.
Yeah.
Shout out to Ron DeSantis for handling the potential looting in Florida after the hurricane, because he came out immediately and was like, don't even think about it.
Yeah.
You go to a house, you don't know what they got behind that door. Good luck trying to take someone's stuff.
Well, there was
insinuating you're going to get shot. They're armed. Don't mess with people's property.
There was a lot of signs from the citizens there, just themselves saying, "You loot, we shoot."
Right. Good.
So that's the culture that comes from Florida of individuals saying, "Hey, this is my property. Hey, a lot of us get to have the right to defend ourselves, and you should think twice before trying to hurt or steal from another innocent human being."
This breakdown of law and order is completely insane. It's antithetical to the culture of the United States, that we would let rioters and looters destroy the country, and then the flames grow greater in 21. And you're like, dude, I don't want Chinese authoritarian communism. I don't want that. But I want to see the National Guard on the street when people are trying to firebomb a building. I want them stopped.
This is wild. All right, wild. And I have this out because it's the first thing I got when I got to Florida. Concealed carry permit.
Ooh.
Right. This is
nice.
the first thing.
You don't need that in West Virginia.
You can never get.
You don't need that in New Hampshire. but I got one too.
Blown out.
Can I see it?
This is. Yes, of course. This is insane. Okay, so Ian, to your point. So I made my Uber stop short of my hotel, and I got out to look at the burned down edifice of the White House. Now you would say, Benny, nobody burned down the White House. Well, the White House is a giant ground, right? And there's groundskeepers facilities on the White House grounds that are considered part of the White House. And those groundkeepers facilities were torched down. This was the burning building when the Antifa mobs attacked, it was in July, attacked the White House, right? And they injured some 90 Secret Service agents and so on and so forth.
Firebombed the guard post, tore the barricades down, set fire to the church.
Set them up.
529 insurrection.
That's right.
May 29th.
520.
Yeah, we talk about this.
So sorry, have you guys seen what it looks like still?
No.
It's still burnt. They haven't fixed it at all.
Whoa.
It's still burned. It's melted to. It's on my other camera because I actually filmed it to put up on our channel. Shout out to Benny Johnson channel. It's linked in the YouTube. Please go follow us. This is insanity. They haven't touched it. It's like a memorial to the leftist insurrection. It's still there. I encourage everybody, if you're in Washington, D.C., to go to the White House grounds and to just look at the still burned down, the flame. You can still see the blackened flames of the building. They haven't touched it. It's been 2 years. They haven't improved it. They haven't tried to fix it. Wow. It's just sitting there, burned down, right by Andrew Jackson. They're right by the famous shot of the White House, right? You see it on the State of the Union and everything. And it's this burned down edifice, like a memorial to what the left did. It's almost like they're proud of what they were able to do when Donald Trump was in office, when they were able to stage their own insurrection.
I don't know if it's like one of two paths. Either we bring in the military to stop the rioters. This Philadelphia, I keep seeing all this street violence in Philly, shops getting destroyed. If we bring in the military and then we become some authoritarian regime, or if we just let the mobs take over and then we have a new mafia running the country, and it's basically young disaffected men that are gangbanging or whatever, dudes that are packed.
We already have a mafia. It's called government.
Well, I'm talking about local, like 17-year-olds that have illegal, like handguns that are like
illegal handguns.
Yeah, illegal concealed pistols that they don't have licenses for or whatever. And I don't want the mafia running the show, but that's what it feels like when I look at videos. And I'm being manipulated by social media, but that's what it feels like.
But this is why I say get out of cities. It was the reason I said Jack Posobiec is because he was saying that before I was saying it. You know, he was warning people for a while to get out of cities, but I was like, yeah, you know.
Sorry, Jack.
Well, no. I mean, we say it a lot on the show too because we did leave. We were on the other side of the river from Philadelphia in Jersey, and then I left New York. I went there, and I said, this isn't fixing anything. So we came out to the middle of nowhere. We're still close enough to DC, but that's the idea. If these 17-year-old kids with their constitutionally protected firearms end up acting a fool and taking over cities, you ain't going to be there. And I'll tell you this, if you were out in MAGA country in West Virginia and something bad happened, it is going to be substantially better because you're not going to have roving bands of teenagers like you are in a city. You're going to have like farmers and their families and their neighbors coming together, and it's going to be not perfect, probably pretty bad in certain ways, but way more organized.
Like, I think that as the liberal economic order crumbles and like the US dollar is no longer the world reserve, people are falling into poverty, living on the street, that is it inevitable that these cities just turn into battlegrounds? That it's either going to be the military mowing people down that are trying to destroy property, or it's going to be gangs mowing people down because they want the property? Like, is it one or the other? Can we find a peaceful solution in the cities? What do you think?
So there was looting in Tampa. There was one incident during the hurricane of looters going through Tampa, my neighborhood, and they were caught immediately. They were arrested immediately by the police, and then you could go every single house, every other house, and find a homie on his doorstep with a firearm. Like dads just got their guns and just sat outside. And there was not a single looting incident for the entire 3 extra days of the hurricane. Because it was rainy and windy.
Wait, you mean the police didn't come and save everybody and protect the neighborhoods? It was the locals who were just
It was the locals who sat there on their porches. Including but not limited to yours truly, who's very happy to have a gun safe now finally, and I can build up my little arsenal here. But my neighbor, I come up the street. I was at Home Depot, got some potting soil, right? So this is better than a sandbag. So don't take hurricane advice from a guy who's just been in Florida for 1 year, but you can put bags of potting soil up and they act as a sandbag. And they're more available, and then you can use them afterwards. Because I don't know if you're going to make like a sandbox or something. You can actually pot your plants, right? It's going to be really pretty weather, beautiful weather after the hurricane. So I'm driving back from Home Depot, and I look over, and here's Johnny. Johnny's my neighbor. Johnny's 50 years old. Johnny rides a Harley. And here's Johnny sitting there. He's an engineer, and he's sitting there with his double barrel on his lap. You know, I was like, Johnny, did somebody send your daughter a naughty DM or what happened, right? What's the double barrel about? He's like, yo, there's looters in the neighborhood. No. We're just making sure they know. Not in my neighborhood. And then up and down the street, you see people sitting there with their firearms, and no more looting.
That's the third choice then. You don't want to rely on the government because they're just going to become autocrats. You don't want to let the gangs destroy. You got to have the civilians armed and protecting their individual properties. So maybe it's time in these cities to lighten up on gun restrictions and encourage people to start training. You
allow law-abiding, innocent human beings to be able to defend themselves, just like the criminals who have all the firearms. And I think I know what video you're talking about. It was from Chicago, allegedly of children from junior high school, and they all had Glocks with switches on it that made them automatic pistols.
Constitutionally protected, but not legal in Chicago.
Yes. Chicago, of course, being a place where they, of course, have the strictest gun control laws, but, teenagers, 14-year-olds were running around with automatic Glocks, and of course the average citizen can't even have a pocket knife to defend themselves because they'll go to jail if the cops find it on them.
Yeah, I wonder
that's crazy.
what
That's an
big city's
absolutely
gonna
insane
open up.
dichotomy that, of course, is not fair for the average human being. That it's not fair for someone that is not trying to hurt anyone, or an individual who just wants to defend themselves that can't, and allows criminals to run free with.
Yeah, because they'll take the guns anyway, the criminals. They don't care about the law. I think what's going to happen
will
is
have the guns.
It's going to build up, and violence, we're going to see this street violence. We'll probably see more of it as people become more poor, more people in the street. And then a city's going to be like, guns are legal now. Yes. Constitutional carry. Everyone can carry. And that city's, the crime is going to plummet in that city.
That's right.
You know how hard it would be to get one of these in D.C.? I tried for years in Washington, D.C. to get one of these. There's one licensed firearm dealer. There's one licensed instructor. They can train one person at a time. So DC versus Heller happens, right, in 2009. 2008. DC versus Heller. DC used to be, for like 30 years, you couldn't own any firearms at all. DC versus Heller overturns this. And so what they did is the bureaucracy comes in and just makes firearms. Even though the Supreme Court said, no, you will allow the sale of firearms, the bureaucracy comes in and says, okay, we'll limit it to a store and a guy. And that person, and then multiple police officers that you need to speak with, right? So I tried the process. I was drowned in paperwork. I was just choked out by the bureaucracy. I could not get my concealed carry in D.C. I tried for years. It was too difficult. Meanwhile, on my block, on 19th Street, Capitol Hill, you could call it like a gentrifying block. I lived right next to a drug dealer, right next to a crack dealer. That guy had so many guns. They were doing open air gun sales on my street. The week that I left, the week I decided to move, there was an open air gun sale going on the street. The guy opened up his trunk and he had, I don't know what he had, like a ton of firearms sitting there. And it, if you made him the right price, you just pick it up out of his trunk, right? There was a deadly shooting on my street that the police had to come get my footage from. This was 2 weeks before we left, right? Guy gets shot in my yard, jumps into the rose bush. We played it on the show a couple times.
But what do you need a concealed permit for when you can just hire an armed security guard who does all the work for you, and you could have armed security guards all around you as you walk around?
You mean like AOC?
Like all of the politicians.
All of them.
Yeah, that's
who can,
right.
and the wealthy individuals who eat at these steakhouses and the lobbyists who don't need to apply for a permit because they just pay for several men who get the permits and then surround them.
They also got walls.
This is what they do. The reason why these elites are okay with banning guns is because guns are only banned for poor people. Now, it would be hard for them to get a firearm as well, even though they are wealthy, but you pay someone a couple $100,000 per year. They take the time and energy to go get the permit and get the guns, and they surround you, and you don't have to think twice about it. Don't worry your pretty little wealthy head off. That's why they vote for this stuff, so that poor people can't have weapons, but they can.
Yeah, and they call for machine gun turrets at the Capitol, as of course they tell you that you can't have a firearm. It's absolutely
That's
crazy.
Nancy. You see the video of her saying they're shipping the migrants north, but the farmers say we need them to pick our crops.
Yeah.
The Florida farmers.
Wow.
Yeah, the Florida farmers are very upset.
He talks like this. They're saying to me, why are you sending the migrants up north? We need them to pick our crops.
And it's just like, they're here illegally. They're not legally allowed to work. And you're telling me that farmers are advocating for the commission of a crime to you, and you agree with them.
Yes.
You do know that Martha, that Nancy Pelosi owns a vineyard, right?
Where?
Yeah.
Nancy's vineyard.
She has a vineyard.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
where Paul Pelosi was driving to, drunk off his ass, like
2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning.
He was going back to their vineyard. So of course, this hits home for Nancy. Okay,
Sure
where's the
does.
labor
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
come from?
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Who's
right.
gonna pick the grapes? And you wouldn't want the Chardonnay grapes that are getting picked raw. They're not getting picked with the beautiful hands, okay, that handle the grapes correctly. They're getting picked like a week too late. That makes bad Chardonnay. And ain't nobody dislike her bad Chardonnay.
I didn't know that. Does that make bad Chardonnay?
I have no idea.
Oh, because you had me worried. I was actually sympathetic to Nancy. I was like, oh, we don't want a Chardonnay room.
Chardonnay.
Nancy Pelosi's vineyard in
The-
St. Helena, California
the
makes her the fourth richest Californian in Congress as of 2015. I'd like to see how that's evolved.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.